I was keep checking with Steph, like holding each other accountable. Have you finished it yet? Have you finished it yet?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I haven't finished it yet. And then at the end,
Welcome to Tell Me Over Tea. My name is Stephanie.
I'm Lois.
And I'm Sylvie.
So, what are we drinking today?
I'm having a hojicha. I hope I am saying that correctly. I got it from Tokyo for my recent trip. It is roasted green tea leaves.
Nice. Hojicha is my favorite. I think I actually prefer it to matcha. It's a bit controversial. Some people might not like that. But yeah. Hojicha is great. I am having a cold oolong fruit tea that I brewed myself actually a few days back. So I just basically had a oolong tea bag, sorry Sylvie, and I cold brewed it and then I concocted it with a bunch of leftover juice in my fridge. So now it's a cold tea. It's like mango juice, raspberry juice, and then I shoved a few cucumber slices in there, and here we go.
Oh my gosh, it's a tea cocktail. I think that needs to be a thing.
Yeah, it's really tasty actually. I recommend like doing this over the summer. It's quite nice. The flavor really builds.
Okay, I'll try. Hopefully it doesn't taste bad.
And I am having one of the key ingredients to make tea, which is hot water. Here we are yet again.
You are...
On a lot of these episodes, Steph will have her comforting mug of
because for our dear listeners, it is very late at night because of the time zones. So I'm trying to go to bed after this.
For sure.
Anyways, today we are going to talk about Poor Things. We decided to make a little bit of a book club, and we picked up this book because the movie was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a little late to the game, but we're finally here to give our thoughts and opinions on this very interesting book and movie. So before that, we wanted to preface a little bit on the style of reader that we are, what kind of books we're interested in, because I don't know about y'all, but for myself, I am not a very voracious reader. I am not a reader at all, and agreeing to do this book club was a way to get back into reading because I used to read a lot as a kid, but not so much anymore. Yeah, what about y'all?
I do read quite a bit. I think less these days. I would love to read a lot more. I think work and life sometimes gets in the way, but I grew up like I used to be the girl that would hide under the covers and read at night with the torch. And my parents would come in and be like, you have to sleep. I love reading. These days, I mainly read nonfiction, to be perfectly honest. So this is actually a fictional novel that one of the first few I've dove into in the last few years. What about you, Sylvie?
I'm a bit similar to Steph. I feel like I read more when I was younger, but I think even as a kid, I didn't read that much. I definitely read more fiction when I was younger, and I felt like for me to really get into a book, I had to really enjoy like the narrative, and I feel like only certain books did that for me. Like it wasn't like every single book I read, I enjoyed. I would love to read more, but again, like Lois says, life and work and things like that get in the way, and I feel unless I have like the book with me at all times, I find it like hard to like pick it back up. But I would go in stints. There would be maybe, when I'm traveling like on a plane where I literally have like a long commute somewhere, I would get into a book. Or if it's like a really good book, I would literally like read the whole thing, and like every chance I have I would read the whole thing because it's like so good and I really enjoy it. It just depends what I'm reading as well. I would say I enjoy fiction, but also I do like non-fiction as well, like autobiographical and like things like that happen in real life as well. I feel like I'm trying to pick it back up a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it is like, for me, like an effort Like I have to really make time for it. Whereas like I know people who can read like 10 books a week, and it's just like, you know, it's nothing for them. I'm not a fast reader as well, so it's like
same. Such a slow reader. I am the slowest reader there is.
yeah.
The really interesting thing that I've discovered is that at the moment I'm in London for a few months, and everyone knows that the tubes, they now have signal sometimes in certain stops and certain lines, but actually mainly it's without signal. So for us who are based in Hong Kong, like we're so used to commuting with signal, and so we're just on our phones or doing things or checking emails. Like you're definitely doing something else on the tube as well at the same time, and it's also really packed. But like ever since coming back to spend time, I've been able to read a lot on commute, and that's just because everyone else is holding a book around here on commute. And I do think that rubs off, and I'm much more inclined to bring a book out and maybe hold it in my hand whilst I'm going somewhere, just so I can do it. So I guess your environment does affect the way you want to spend your time and stuff. A favourite book. In recent years, my favourite book probably is Dolly Alderton's Everything I Know About Love. And I haven't read that book in a while. But that book I read that during lockdown in the midst of the pandemic, and it is to this day one of my favorite books. And recently, well, no, not recently, in last year, I think BBC, if not wrong, or Channel 4, it could be either one, bought the rights to make this into a series, and the series was also wonderful.
Wait.
And I absolutely loved the series. I think it was such an accurate portrayal of the book.
Wait, what's the series on? Is it on, like, what platform is it on?
I think it's BBC or Channel 4. It's one of those.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
sorry,
but...
I was like, ooh, Netflix?
Yes. Oh, no. But Dolly Alderton, in recent years, probably one of my favourite authors in terms of, like, the voice that she carries. She's an English author. But the way she writes about womanhood in modern society, I so resonate with, even if we have, like, different experiences. But yeah, anyone else with a favourite book or, like, something that has really kind of stayed with you?
No, I really can't give you one. No.
Sure.
Sorry, Steph, you go. I can't.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of one, let us know. But also...
Oh, okay. Well, I can give you a book that I really liked that I read recently. It's probably going to be the same as you, Steph.
Maybe?
Which, actually, you lent me the book. It's Lessons in Chemistry.
Yes, a very good book. Love that book.
I've not read it yet.
I can't say it's my favourite book, but it's a book that I really liked that I read recently.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I knew you were probably going to say that book. And I listened to an audiobook, which I don't know if that counts as reading. People say it does. I'm like, I didn't sit down and actually read it, but I did listen to it. It's probably not my most favorite, but it's a recent favorite because like I said, don't read that much. It's called I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a really good audiobook to listen to because the author is the one who narrates the book, and like hearing her life experience of being like a child actor and a very famous one at that, and hearing her voice being put to her words made it so powerful.
It's still on my bucket list. I grew up watching iCarly.
Yeah, I 1000% recommend the audiobook if you want to like have the book and then also have the audiobook so that you can follow along. There are certain moments where her emotion comes through and I was holding back tears because you can really feel all of her experiences like built up into this reading, and it was really, really good. Yeah, so now that you know a little bit about our own reading history and our reading styles, hopefully that informs you about the book that we're going to talk about, which is Poor Things. Do you guys have any burning thoughts about the book?
I'm going to come right out the gate and say that I actually found this book incredibly difficult to read. And I haven't felt that way in a long time about a book. Potentially, I think largely it had to do with the fact that I don't quite resonate with the tone of voice that this book decided to use, or the lens of the character that it goes through. And so I just found myself wincing a lot at the things that were being described, or like the language that was being used. Yeah, it was tough, but there was like bits of the English literature student in me appreciated bits of how this book was written and how the narrative was presented, but like you know when you read a book and you don't like the character or a lot of the characters in it, that's how I felt coming out of the book. Like I felt like I had not so great feelings about so many of the characters within the book, which maybe is provoking in some sense, but I guess my taste in reading a lot of the time falls on how much I can relate to characters within the book or like the voice of the book, and so I struggle with this one. What about the two of you?
Yeah, same thoughts, really. It was really hard. It's the style of writing. Like, it's not like I haven't, like, read novels or read, you know, other books that is that is fiction, but it's just the style of writing, and maybe it was, like, the time that it was set in like, the 18th century or whenever it was. It was just very hard for me to read. I kept putting it down and picking it back up, and then because I was keep checking with Steph, like holding each other accountable, have you finished it yet?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I haven't finished it yet. And then at the end, I thought I'd finished the book at the end, and then Steph goes, no, there's a whole other bit where, like, you know, she, Bella Baxter, the main character, essentially has a chapter where she basically describes the whole experience in her point of view, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
There's another bit. I just wanted to basically finish it as quickly as possible.
It's not over.
Yeah, there was no, like, I feel like there wasn't really like I was like, where's the build up? It was all just very like chaotic, like all the time, and then I felt it was really long, like the you know, the letters, you know, that was how the story unfolded through like this ginormous letter by what is this called, the Duncan guy. Like it was very, very difficult for me to but I persisted because I was like, I need to read this book because we're gonna watch the film afterwards.
Yeah, I really don't think I would have finished this book if it were not for this book club, because it was really hard to read, especially for someone who doesn't read a lot. Having this be like one of the first books of getting back into reading, I was like, oh, I don't know if I like reading. I don't know if I enjoy reading. I think there was a lot in the introduction that you were supposed to read, which I fully skipped the first time. And then reading the actual meat of the story, I was really confused because a lot of what I thought this book was going to be was informed by the trailer of the movie. And so when the very beginning has nothing to do with Bella Baxter, or like very little to do with her and a lot to do with like McCandless and like his obsession with Godwin, I was like, what is happening? What is this story? And then, you know, we finally meet Bella, and then it starts to make sense, but it really doesn't. And then it finishes that bit at the end where she essentially discounts the entire story. And by that point, I have struggled to finish this book, so I'm pissed. I'm like, oh, so it was all a lie. Then why did I read this? Like, I'm so confused. And then there was an index at the end where it talks about Victoria and her actual life and McCandless and his actual life. And I skipped that part entirely because I was like, I don't know what's happening. And it wasn't until I had finished the movie and then gone to like look at some reviews that I realized that actually that's kind of important, because it discounts the narrator in the very beginning. Like, McCandless he's an unreliable narrator, so you should not be
not objective.
Yeah, so you shouldn't trust him in anything that he says. And like, Victoria's account is one thing, but also there's like seeds of doubt, because in her obituary or whatever at the very end, she like, it says that like she was like 90 something when she died, but she has the body of like a 60 something year old, so then you don't know who's telling the truth and who's lying. But I never got to that part when I was reading, and I still haven't read it. So to me it was really, like, I felt like I was too stupid to, like, understand, because I just wanted a really straightforward book about about a woman who I don't know,
there's nothing
stuff.
Straightforward about poor things.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because the movie actually is a little bit more straightforward than the books is, in that it doesn't discount McCandless's, like, recounting of this story, and it takes away, you know, the end bit. And and I can't say that I liked it any better. In fact, I think I liked it worse. So I don't know. I feel like I lost on both accounts. I don't really know what was happening the whole time.
I fully had like zero idea of what the story was about. Like before reading the book, before watching the film, literally was just like, oh, it's Emma Stone. I like Emma Stone. Saw the trailer and it looks quite interesting. Like I was very caught with the visuals, and then I was like, yeah, you know.
Oh, 100%.
Just go and, why not? Should be all right. Lo and behold, I also watched the film, and there were loads of moments where I felt very uncomfortable, and I was just trying to make sense, and I was trying to like see it from like, I didn't also want to like super analyze it, but then it just, as an overall sensation feeling, like as I don't know, as a woman watching it, I was just like, there's some moments where I was just like, oh my god. There were moments that I also just like fully laughed out loud because it was hilarious, because Emma Stone is an amazing actress, and there was one bit I literally was just like, I just lolled. But yeah, I thought it was gonna build into something that was kind of into like something more empowering in like more of a feminist way, but then it never really got there. Like even at the end, it didn't translate that well. Yeah, Lois, what do you think?
I mean, to carry on your thoughts, Sylvie, I think actually the film stripped away a lot of the female autonomy that existed in the book, because of how the book ended and how that chapter with Bella Baxter flipped a lot of things. It made you question the entire like perspective of the book. Whereas if someone only watched the film, you're still getting, in my opinion, quite male-centric lens of this story, without the flipping it on its head. But also the film, I think, feels less grotesque than the book itself, because Emma's acting and the way she decides to portray the character lends to like the farce of it and the satire of it and like the comedy of it almost. But then basically my mindset was, I really hope the film saves the book, or the book saved the film, and it didn't with either. I think if I were to just look at the film from a aesthetic perspective, or maybe like a narrative perspective, there are things, elements that I can appreciate. But like if I were to rate this book as rate the film as a representation of the book, I think it was poor, like the title suggests, as in it's not
no pun intended,
truthful enough. it's not truthful enough, and it almost is an entirely different way of looking at this story. And I know it's fictional, but the film left me actually probably even more uncomfortable, because I had a lot more mixed emotions. I think when something gets translated visually, there are certain things that hits you in a different way. As a woman, I think, watching the film, you also feel I felt quite disturbed, actually. And maybe that's the whole point of the film. But like the book already disturbed me because of the language, but then to see that language translated visually just disturbed me even more. And sometimes I think it took away from my experience of like appreciating the cinematography of it. Like the thing that I loved about the film that we never got in the book was the way they painted this world.
Mm-hmm.
The book is set, first of all, for people who haven't read the book or seen the film, the book is set in Glasgow. The story is set in Glasgow, but actually in the film they changed it to London, which to this day I do not understand why, because I think it's quite a big decision to change like a setting of a story. It changes the whole way you would view the time of which it was set in, and also the cultural take on the idea of gender and women and men. And it's just I don't see how it could have been intentional, and why it was intentional to set it in London versus, because the the characters still have a Glaswegian accent. So I'm like, well, you're still keeping the roots of the character, but you've decided to uproot it into a different city. Like, what for? I don't really get it. Maybe it was to make people relate to it, because, you know, in the film, there's this big emphasis on Bella traveling the world and seeing the world through these countries and through her experiences. So maybe they wanted to make these marker points more obvious through like cities that were, you know, more recognizable to the general public. Perhaps, I don't know. But I wish I had better things to say about this. I feel like I am going to be in this episode more critical than anything, and the only thing that I would give it loads of credit for in terms of the film would be the aesthetics of it. Like, I'm sure, Steph, you can appreciate so much of what was visually like presented, because it was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, there was so much that I like loved if I was just feasting with my eyes alone and I had no brain and like didn't care about the context.
Yeah, it was absolutely gorgeous. And I saw some behind the scenes of them 3D rendering the entire sets. And that was one of the things that was so like awe-inspiring of the film. And I really like the way that they did the credits. I don't know if you guys saw the end credits, but every single end credit had details that you might have missed because they were just shots of different set pieces or different details in the set. And I just thought that was absolutely amazing. Yeah. I think I agree though, because so I have come around on the book a little bit after listening to a lot of different people talk about the book and the book versus the film. I think that the film missed the mark, especially with not having the blurb at the end, or like changing the ending essentially. It feels like the film does this thing that a lot of films often do, where they want to touch on themes of feminism by quote unquote subverting, how do I explain this? Like, they'll be like, oh, okay, this is bad. We're going to show you how this is bad. But then they don't denounce anything. So actually, they're just upholding whatever is being shown. And I know that the argument is that, oh, it doesn't have to be so black and white. And of course, you go in to this film knowing about the book and understanding that it is a feminist piece. So the audience knows better. But I don't see how some people would know better. Like, it really just feels like you're upholding the standard.
No.
And one of the things that is like a detail that I was like, what is happening, is that if she is a grown woman, why doesn't she have any body hair? I really don't understand. And she doesn't have a period. And maybe that can be chalked up to God gave her a hysterectomy, so then she doesn't have one anymore. I don't know. But she should have body hair. It's one of those things where if this was a male fantasy in the book, as it is a male fantasy, then discounting it, I would understand why she's presented in this way. But this is technically her story in the film. And because there is no delineation between what is McCandless's fantasy and what is her true story in the film, because it's all seen as true, then like I don't understand why she still is the embodiment of the male fantasy. Because also in the books, she talks about how he was a foolish man and he was lazy, and how she is not as beautiful as he makes her out to be in his own recounting. But then you cast somebody like Emma Stone, who is absolutely gorgeous and the beauty standard and like the ideal. So in some ways it's like, okay, you can argue that this is a feminist piece, but then the details suggest otherwise, you know?
That's also exacerbated when she's in the scene and when she's in the brothel, and her boss is like, she said something about like your beauty, and you know, she's like in the lineup basically like, why do I have to, you know, sleep with these men that smell bad and that I don't like and stuff, and you know, she's in this lineup of all the other girls and she's the one that's like the most beautiful, and you know, she's like, use your youth, because otherwise like at the end of the day when you're like an old hag like me, nobody will want to you know, sleep with you for free either. So it's like, it kind of like enhances that concept in which you were talking about just now, I feel.
Yeah.
The thing that I probably see successful in the book and the film is that the use of her character to question a lot of the female and male aspect within society is done quite well, I think. As in, you use her infancy and her adolescence and her innocence to point fingers at what we've constructed as a society in the way we view gender, power dynamics, politics and everything is interesting. But like Steph said, I struggled because I actually felt like the flip didn't happen soon enough, or the flip wasn't strong enough for me to feel that someone, if they're only watching the film, would walk away from this thinking, like I've just seen something where it challenged this aspect of society, and now I can take something away from it, because it felt like it felt like the film was recounting what was wrong with the way we see this, and the flip just never happened. And so I'm like kind of concerned that it came out like this, because I think that without having read the book, you're not getting a full enough picture of potentially what the author had meant to translate through all this like madness and chaos. Like Sylvie said, I think the chaotic nature of the book didn't really translate in the film, to be honest. I found the film much less chaotic. It was maybe weird in some way, but it didn't have that chaos that I read in the book through the point of view of the lead character. And so it's the interpretation of someone who's read the book versus the film and someone who's done both is going to be so different. And maybe that's the point of the production itself, but I do think it gets lost if we're going to stay true to what Alistair Gray had written, then the film does a poor job of it. But the costumes were amazing, and I was indulging so much in the set, the design, the world they created, which in a previous episode I mentioned that I don't really enjoy fantasy or period drama, and the fantastical aspect of this film really drew me in, and I didn't expect it. And maybe it's because we've had that discussion, and so I was like, let's try and indulge in this a little bit. And potentially because I was like a bit disconnected with the narrative, I like started to pay more attention to these other things to salvage my impression of the film itself. And then I also kept referring back to the book, and the dialogue within the film simplifies the book. It does. The book itself is way more nuanced than I think what was shown in the film, to be very honest, though, because obviously there's much less time and you have to be much more succinct in the way you deliver the story through dialogue and through scenes and through costume and whatnot, and the atmosphere you create. I mean, in terms the controversial topics, like there were so many, weren't there?
There's loads.
Because it tackled a lot of contending issues within society. Obviously the gender aspect of it was a massive one, and in the book I think it does it in a much more subtle way because it's so much open for interpretation, but I think the film screams it, to be fair. Like the film makes it so known that there is a real
No. Just I was thinking about the film. Did you notice that like when you're watching the film, at certain points they had like certain parts where they just had like a little hole, like a peephole, like the lens,
like a fisheye.
Like
yeah,
is
the peephole.
I just random thought like
the one where it's like,
was it fisheye?
Yeah, it was a fisheye lens.
I was just trying to understand like what's that representative of? Like I just was trying to like understand. Yeah, I was
also
trying
the
to
black
understand,
and
like,
white
the cinematography aspect of it, and was just trying to like, how does that relate to, I don't know, the story itself, the narrative in the book, and the lens, and is it like, I don't know, is this the audience's lens or whatever? Like, how are you seeing this story? Like, you can get very abstract with it, but
Yeah, I mean, I read a little bit about the different lenses and how the director of photography was using like old Victorian lenses to because it's technically set in Victorian times. Even though like the film is much more fantastical and sort of like has yeah, different elements, but it's rooted in Victorian times. Having those lenses sort of like inform the way you see the actual characters, I thought was interesting. And in terms of like black and white to color, her world is very black and white up until she like leaves, and then everything turns into color, which I thought was interesting. And
Yeah.
I thought it would be a little bit more jarring to see, but actually like they blended it really well in a way where like I didn't even notice when it started to switch to color.
Wait, you didn't notice that? It was so stark. I felt like it was so stark.
Well, because there's the first scene where she jumps off the bridge, that's in color, and then everything's black and white.
Yes.
And then there's a flashback that's also in color before it goes black and white again, and then it turns into color when she actually leaves for the first time. So there's stuff in between that sort of transitions it so that it's not fully black and white from the first time all the way up until, you know, she leaves or whatever. And so for me it was more blended than I thought it was going to be. Like I really thought it would be like all of a sudden everything's in Technicolor, there'd be an effect or something, I don't know. But that wasn't the case, and so my brain didn't really register it in that moment. Yeah, and I don't know, I think in terms of visual symbolism, like there was a lot that was really good about this film, but I was really distracted the entire time because we were doing this podcast. I mostly saw it in terms of how is it different from the book.
Yes.
And I think maybe it is a disservice to the film. I do understand that the way that I consume this film means that I didn't get like the full experience of just enjoying it the first time before I went in to like start to see the differences. But they were so stark that it was really distracting for me to be like, why this choice? Why did they create another lobotomized girl?
Yes.
Things that I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Like why is Bella's father, actual biological father, not there? Because I think that in the book informs something about where she came from that is more generational and compared to just the general coming to take her away. And some of it I did like when she goes back to the general's house and we experience her past and are informed by what she experiences in the present. I thought that was good, and I really loved, you know, the floors that were almost bloodstained and it was black. That was really beautiful. But most of the changes impacted the film in a way that was worse than the book. And I didn't enjoy the book, and I still don't understand the book. The only reason why I feel like the book is better is because I listened to other people who are smarter than me
Analyze the book.
Yeah, and so I still don't understand it. And like I understand the concept of it and I understand what I was supposed to get out of it, but I don't think I got anything out of it. And that's what makes me feel so conflicted about the film as well, because the book has, you know, its fans, and I want to understand why people love this and tout it as a piece of feminist literature. And Aleister Gray is like an activist and socialist, and he did all of these things to further the feminist agenda.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm not smart enough to understand that, so that's one thing. But then I'm like, does that mean I'm also not smart enough to understand this film and why people also tout it as a feminist piece? And is it only because the source material is so rooted in feminism that this piece also people are saying that it is? Or is it actually something that I'm not getting? And I don't know.
I actually don't think that the film was a feminist piece. I actually think the film was it was an attempt at a feminist piece that didn't really work out. I also heard through the grapevine that the people who were working on the film, from a production point of view, it didn't have enough women in the space. And so although like I haven't looked in this enough, I do feel that if you were to make something like this into a film, it needed a certain like diversity of people working behind it so that it would have the right balance, I think. And then the choices they made with redacting certain things for a film. I understand that it's unfair to compare a film to a book, because a book can have so many more layers. There's so many more pages and so many more words for you to convey something. And a film is often A, shorter, but then B, also trying to accommodate to a wider audience. And so there's certain things that sometimes gets watered down for the sake of being able to fit into, be it the box office or like the interest of the public. But the choices so finding out that the production end of it lacked women who were making decisions artistically and creatively, and then also seeing the choices they made with leaving certain things out within the book, I felt like it was a real disservice to what the book was actually intending to describe about the female experience or womanhood or aspect within human emotion. Because the interesting comparison that I liked about this story is the human anatomy and idea of illness and sickness versus like aspect of the brain, as in how we see the world and how we can also improve that. Or there can also be people who are like ill in terms of the way they're seeing something. So like the health, like mental health versus physical health was a real thing that I drew out of from the story, and the comparison of that is much stronger in the book than it is in the film. I think the film is distracted by so many other things, like the beauty of the set, which I was so distracted by. I think part of me just wanted to lean into that so that I would like the film more, and so I like started to really explore that, then become hypercritical of the narrative and the way they chose to make decisions within the film.
Whether or not if it's in the book or in the film, I just felt in a position of like Bella Baxter, that she was just trapped, like she was just like under ownership of, all the males in her environment. Like even though there is the liberation like sexually, but still it was like there's Godwin and then there was Duncan, and then maybe in the end she has some sort of autonomy where she, in the book it would be her point of view, and then in the film is that she, which is different from the book, that she, becomes, I don't know, the doctor. She becomes a doctor in the book as well, I think, right? That she doesn't marry what's his name? McCandles. Yeah. Is it McCandles or McCandless? I don't know.
I've been reading McCandles in my head.
I thought it was McCandles as well. I just felt like there was so much of this. It was so focused on the sexual liberation kind of concept, but then like if you view it in a way that she's still essentially like a child, like where kids don't have full opinions and thoughts, and like does she have full autonomy of this, like is she actually like enjoying like this whatever road she's taken on, like this journey, this fantasy like of like exploring like self-discovery. But she's still like, yes, she goes into the brothel and she kind of is self-efficient, but she's still relying on men that she has to sleep with, and is she like a full adult yet? Like it's still this question. And then even at the end, sure, she becomes like, I feel like I was so distracted with all of the I'm speaking specifically the film because I watched it recently and it's just fresh in my mind, of just visually like just all the very like sexual scenes, that it was hard for me to then come around, even at the end when she maybe has a relationship with like her lover who is female, but like it doesn't really translate that she is fully kind of liberated and has like self-autonomy. Like she still is a like a byproduct of something that was created by like a dude, like I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I there's so many things where I feel like I just don't understand.
The overwhelming feeling I got was that like her innocence and her sexuality and her autonomy were all extremely exploited in this narrative. And
Yeah.
I think that the point of the message was that, but then it irked me that I think the film also exploited that, and it didn't give me another way to see it.
Did.
Yes, and it didn't give me another way to see it.
Yeah, I feel like even like the very end bit where she's just in the backyard and she's just having cocktails. I feel like that's like, I don't know, 1 minute of the whole entire film. Like the message, in the end, like
yeah, like
still didn't...
I without a doubt, I think that there was aspects of the film that were really well made, but then I couldn't help but get that I felt like this was like another version of this Bella Baxter story that happened within the film, where a bunch of men made this film about this girl, and it's just like it's like kind of repeating on itself. And I was so thrown by that whole thing at the end of the film, and I was like, isn't this just the story all over again, just a different version of it? And it's meant to, and her development cognitively and emotionally and psychologically came so late in comparison to her sexual awakening that I didn't feel that there was that much autonomy in that. It's like her sexual awakening is biological, but her picking up a book and meeting the two characters on the boat and actually building a sense of like thought for herself, that's kind of when she stops going, God thinks, God says, like referring to Godwin, and how she is basically, her opinion and her judgment is informed by his like instillment and what he has told her. Like that was his her world, and it came so late after her sexual awakening that I'm like, so then everything for the first like half of the book and the film, she was just operating as an adult in an adult world, but she is actually in the body of an adult, but she's actually a child in her mind. And I was just so disturbed by that.
Yeah, and like the two characters on the boat, I think are quite crucial for her to like then have this realization of like what society is really like, and like how there are bad people.
Yes.
And actually I thought because the two characters on the boat basically teach her about the world, essentially, right? Because God traps her away.
Socialism.
Right? Yeah. But I also felt like in the film, like that scene where they go out for like a tiny bit and have tea, and then they see like the people in Alexandria, and then she like shoves this, I don't know, case of money. I feel like that was just so disingenuous, and just like it like in the book it was more, I feel like it translated better, it came through a bit more that she wants to be a good person in this world.
Yes.
Like much more than like the film. Like the film was just that one little bit, and it was just
so fast.
I'm gonna throw some money at these poor people, and then that was it. Like it, yeah. It was that was
a prime example of this film skipping out a lot of the texture of how that came around, because it was I think her empathy was an important realization for the character itself, but it was, there was not enough time to build it, and it felt a little bit forced, I think.
Yes. So I mean, we've really gone to town with our opinions and our confusion with both the film and the book, and I feel like there's loads of different nuances and layers to both of them for us to continue talk about. But for now, we have called it a wrap for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed listening to this, go give us a like on Spotify or any other platforms that we're on, and we will see you next time. Bye.